What's happening, food fans? Pitmaster Shane D back again with my list of 5 things for this week, and we're going to cover one of the pieces of meat that I feel like gets overlooked a lot in barbecue, the old pork loin. Yep, that's right, it's the other white meat, and yet we get tripped up on how to cook it. So I'm going to give you 5 things that I think that people are overlooking or maybe doing a little wrong with the pork loin. And maybe some tips and tricks along the way. But we're going to try to keep this one short. And we are back to the same format that you guys asked for. You didn't like not seeing my smiling, chubby face, I guess. So we're going to try it this way, and we'll see what you think. So, number one thing I think most people do on pork loin that they really should consider doing a different way. When we're doing these on the grill, what do? We assume we got to put rub and we got to put sauce on everything, right? We only use barbecue flavors. You know what I love most about the pork loin? It is the other white meat. And whether you want to bring some Italian flair to it with a little bit of smoke, or you want to do something that is in the with a little bit of Latin flair, you can certainly do that, and it's a wide open canvas. I've even seen people make pulled pork with a pork loin. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that because I think the best part about a pork loin is kind of make it into those center cut chops that you get to, eat. But that's the beauty of the pork loin. You can do it however you want. And, another thing I'll throw in there, it's not really part of the 5 things. Most people assume the pork loin and the tenderloin are the same thing. They're not. They're very, very different. Your pork loin is going to be about this big, right? Tenderloin is going to be about this big. So, they cook very differently, so you don't necessarily apply the same methods, but you can apply the same flavors. So, branch out, check out a few other ways to cook a pork loin. Any way that you can do it in an oven, you can certainly do it on the grill. And I know we're all smokers and grillers at heart if you're following my channel, but at the same time, that's not all we are. And we can certainly do some different things with the pork loin. Some suggestions. You can make a roulade out of it. It's a great recipe that I've done. It's on the Grill Grill's website for a roulade that's covered in a marinara sauce that works fantastic with smoke. I've won several anything but competitions using some sort of roulade, whether it's taking, some sort of spinach and cheese and, all this sort of goodness and mushrooms and putting it in that roulade. And then cooking it that way, it really allows you to get creative on something that doesn't require a lot of cook time. So keep that in mind, branch out, try a few different things, and I think the world of the pork loin will definitely open up to you, and you'll start cooking those things every night of the week. Because I can get a pork loin, even a giant one, done in about 2 hours flat if I need to. Yep, cook them hot and fast you want, low and slow, it's up to you. But they will take smoke really well and really quickly and do a fantastic job, even on these pellet grills. So number one, another mistake that a lot of people make is they just overcook the darn things, right? I have a rule that I will not cook a pork loin past 145-ish. I think once I hit 145, I've got to let it rest, and that's it. A lot of these guys are going 150s, 160s. And you've really lost the pork loin at that point. You've lost all that succulent juiciness. And that's why a lot of people don't like pork loin. They assume it's really dry. And it is if you overcook it. And you don't have to do that. So only take it to 145. Now, I know you're out there. But Shane, there's one end that's like this big around. And another end's like this big around. What are we going to do? How do we keep it cooking the same? Well, that's pretty easy. You just cut it in half. Cook your skinny end and your thick end a little different. Put the thick end in faster. Now, no, not all these taper down as much. So it's hit and miss on that. Some really do start off like a baseball bat and then really finish kind of skinny on the other end. If you have that, cut it kind of in that middle spot and cook them at 2 separate temps, or 2 separate times, I should say. Put the thick one in a little early, put the skinnier in a little after that, and they'll finish roughly about the same time. But don't be afraid to cut that. It's not going to hurt anything at all. Another piece of advice I'll give you is that everyone assumes because they think it's a lot like turkey, because it is a white meat, that it's going to dry out. and they assume you must brine these things. Now, I'll say these things take brine very well, and you can inject a lot of great flavors with it, by brining. And I've got this maple bourbon brine that I use all the time for pork loins. It's great, but it's not required. So, I don't typically recommend wet brines, but I will say in this instance, the pork loin, because of how the muscle structure is, really do handle wet brines very well. So don't be afraid to try those. Don't be afraid to experiment. You can build a lot of really great sweet kind of sub flavors in there with something like that maple bourbon brine. But don't assume you have to brine it, okay? Because it can be great if you don't, number 2, overcook it. So, number 5, we talked about the intimidation by the size. You get something that barely fits in your smoker. It's like 2.5, 3 feet long, right? It's this giant hunk of meat. What am I going to do with it? Goes back to that overcooking step. Don't be afraid to cut that thing in half. Also, don't be afraid to cut it in half and set a piece aside and cut chops out of it. Put those in a vacuum bag, or put them in a Ziploc bag and toss them in the freezer. So a giant pork loin will feed. Like I've had some that I've gotten 30 almost 1-inch slices out of. So that's a lot of food with no bone and no waste. That's the thing I really like about the pork loins too. They feed a lot of people, and I think people just get intimidated by them. They're afraid they're going to dry out. They're a little too big. So cut them in half, and that's going to address that for you. The last thing, if you cook these whole, the one thing I'll say, if you cut them too soon, they can dry out on you. And what I mean by that, once you're done cooking, you've cut them all up and you lay them on a plate and you're like, oh man, I can just see all that juice coming out. And it really will on a pork loin, because the type of muscle, it's all long, kind of uniform fiber muscle. So if you cut it, it can, lose some of its moisture. So I like to cut mine right at the table, right at the last minute, okay? So that's 5 really quick tips and tricks for you heading into the holiday. We got Labor Day coming up if you want to cook a pork loin. Hope that helps you out. Let's recap some of the things I've been up to. I went down to Pensacola, and we filmed a commercial, cooked a lot of food, had a great time with the crew of BBQ. Been on the road a lot. September, I'm going to be on the road a lot more. Places you're going to be able to catch me, I'm going to be at the Decatur, Alabama Barbecue Festival in competition. I've got a little harvest festival here at home that I'm cooking right before that. I'll be at Praise the Lord up in Murfreesboro, Illinois. Let's see, where else? Seems like I had another place in September. I got to look at my calendar. I honestly can't remember. This time of year is absolutely crazy for me, so it's just kind of how it goes. I'm on the road more than I'm home. And that's just the way the fall time goes for me. After that, I'll be back down in the Gulf Shores area again for about a week. Going to do a little vacation time, and that'll be in October. And I've got some filming I'm going to do while I'm down there. And then at that point, it's all ramping up, getting ready for World Food. I'll also be at the Jack Daniel's Invitational in October. I'll be there with the BBQ folks. And so if you're around any of those places and would like to stop by and say hi, hit me up, man. Let me know where you're going to be. And I'll be happy to hang out with you and say hi. And if you got any questions, happy to answer them out there, okay? So, as always, you know me. I'm Pitmaster Shane D. Thanks for watching. Click that like, click that subscribe button. Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your pa, tell your cousin from Arkansas that they need to get on here and get subscribed up, because we got a lot of things coming. We'll catch you next time.